Well, to no surprise, it appears that President Donald Trump is calling for the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza. That is right. He is asking Egypt and Jordan to allow the rest of the Palestinians in Gaza to come into their countries. What is this really about? First and foremost, let's go ahead and get into this clip here. I want you to hear this audio here from Donald Trump discussing this issue.
I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime, I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. I mean, you're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's over the centuries that's had many conflicts that site, and I don't know. It's something has to happen, but.
I want to pause there for just a second. Did everyone notice the numbers that he mentioned? He said we're talking about 1.5 million people, so 1.5 million people. There were 2 million people in Gaza before this genocide. Now, corporate media continues to say, oh, it's over 47,000 people that have been killed, or I think some of them are more so now starting to inch towards 50,000. But Donald Trump just admitted to you there about 1.5 million, which is more than the number that is being reported by corporate media if you do the math, which goes to show you once again what I've continued to tell you. The numbers that corporate media was providing was incorrect, that they were purposely making sure that that number was lower than it actually was, because then you can't push back and say that it's not a genocide. So pay attention to what he said there. Let's go ahead and continue.
It's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace. Richard.
Pause. He just told you everything, almost everything is demolished there. So when you heard last year when people were saying that, well, the Republicans are going to turn Gaza into a parking lot, one of the things I continue to tell you is that Gaza is pretty much almost destroyed anyway, almost completely demolished. And if you look at the pictures and the images that you've seen from Gaza, you'll see this to be the case as well, right? This is not to excuse Donald Trump. What he's doing is absolutely not right. It's wrong. It's not right to displace people regardless of who they are or where they are. But pay attention to that again, right? Okay, let's continue.
Temporarily, or it could be either. It could be temporarily, could be long term. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime.
So he goes on to say it could be temporary, it could be long term. I think we all know that once the Palestinians leave Gaza, they will not be permitted to come back. This is the land grab that I've been telling you about since October 7th. This is what Israel wants. They want the land. Make no mistake, if Kamala Harris would have won, the same thing would be happening, because both parties support what Israel is doing. Now, there may be certain politicians within these parties that don't support it, but as a whole, both parties support Israel's so-called right to have that entire region. So we have to continue to press this, because I've noticed some people are saying, oh, well, look what Trump is doing. Yeah, what Trump is doing is wrong. But make no mistake, Kamala would have done the same thing, because these politicians are bought by AIPAC. Kamala was bought by AIPAC. Donald Trump is bought by AIPAC. So both of them would have been moving in the direction that Israel wanted. And what they're going to try to do now is they're going to try to sell this as, we're trying to make sure they have a safer place to be, because where they live now is almost completely demolished. That's besides the point. This is their home. This means that once again, the Palestinian people will be refugees again. If Egypt and Jordan were to take up that offer, and I want to go back here and to show you, shout out to Hotspot for spotlighting this. Ethnic cleanser in chief Donald Trump calls on Jordan and Egypt to accept Palestinian refugees from Gaza to clean out the area after reversing a Biden admin pause for the 2,000-pound bombs made available again to Israel. So again, you can see the sources here. Trump calls to clean out Gaza. Okay. You can see that there. And you can see here, Trump makes 2,000-pound bombs available to Israel, undoing the Biden pause. So, as I've said before, this was always the plan. Now, we got to bring up the energy issue here, right? Because there is gas along these shores. And I told you, they don't just want the land, they want the resources that are there as well. Take a look at this. This was reported in 2023. The Gaza war's impact on energy security in the East Mediterranean. So it says here that prior to the war, in Gaza, natural gas discoveries in East Mediterranean offered attractive prospects as Israel boosted its gas production from 16.11 billion cubic meters in 2020 to 21.92 BCM last year. It expanded energy cooperation with Egypt. Washington, meanwhile, brokered a historic maritime boundary deal between Israel and Lebanon, allowing the two to commence gas exploration. See this? Gas exploration and drilling in once disputed waters. So remember this whole concept when Trump said we're going to drill, baby, drill? Okay, pay attention to that. On the surface, the region appeared to be entering a phase of energy cooperation and security. Then came Israel's war with Hamas. So do you see that part there? Then we're going to go ahead and jump to this part here. In recent years, Israel has brought new offshore gas fields on stream, allowing it to increase production for the domestic market, reduce the use of more polluting fuels like coal for power generation, and expand its gas exports. During the first half of 2023, Israel took in over 263 million in natural gas royalties, according to government figures, a 23% increase over the same period last year. So this, at the end of the day, is also about resources and money. And you can see the map here. Here's the Gaza Strip down here below. So you can see they consider the Palestinians to be in the way. So if they were to push the Palestinians to Jordan, which, by the way, I want to add, there are already Palestinian refugees in Jordan. The Queen of Jordan is Palestinian. Keep that in mind. Or if they were to push them to Egypt, then the Palestinians in Gaza will be out of the way. Israel will come in, take the rest of the Gaza Strip. Don't forget about Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, also was interested in real estate dealings in the Gaza Strip. So they're all going to come in, take that land. And by the way, there is no temporary. Once the Palestinians are pushed out and displaced, they will not be allowed to return to Gaza. You see this in the United States, like when there's been cases of gentrification, people will come in, obviously not the same as genocide, but these developers will come into the communities and tell you that they are going to rebuild the community and you will get to enjoy all of this. But oftentimes that's not what happens. They come in and rebuild the community, but then you're priced out. So you're pushed out of the neighborhood, unable to come back and to return to that neighborhood. So they're not going to fix up Gaza for the Palestinians to come back and live in. They're going to rebuild Gaza for them. That's important to understand. Let's go on a little bit more here about these resources in Egypt. Israeli government figures show that in 2022, 63% of its gas exports went to Egypt and 37% went to Jordan. The exports to Egypt, which are transferred to Ashkelon, to Al Arish, have been increasing since 2020. Last year, Israeli gas flows to Egypt via the East Mediterranean gas pipeline. So that's the EMG. That increased to 5.81 BCM from 4.23 BCM in 2021. and 2.16 BCM in 2020. Egypt does produce its own gas, but it aspires to become a regional hub for that sector. It has experienced a production decline in recent years, affecting its ability to meet domestic demand and export LNG. So, this is something that possibly Egypt could be interested in as well. That being said, when Nico House went to Egypt last year, Nico said he was surprised to see how many refugees Egypt already had. That's another thing. When Egypt said, we don't have the resources to take in over 1 million people, we just don't have it, Nico said they're not lying. There are also Syrian refugees in Egypt, which I was not aware of that one until after Nico's visit. So keep that in mind. To sum everything up here, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see about war, it says war disrupts Israel's oil imports. You see this? It says this is the second time that Israel's oil imports have experienced interruptions this year. In March, flows of Iraqi Kurdish crude from Turkey's Ceyhan terminal were halted due to an ongoing dispute between Baghdad, Erbil, and Ankara. As a result, Israel had to increase crude imports from other sources. So you see what's happening. Now, conclusion. Over the past few years, Washington has encouraged East Mediterranean states to diversify their energy sources, all the while tackling climate change. This energy diplomacy succeeded in some places, but the Gaza war has exposed the area's high geopolitical risk. If the war expands, and we'll say the genocide expands, the hydrocarbon sector will not be spared the economic ramifications, and the energy plans of regional governments will be postponed for years to come. So everybody has a stake in Gaza. It's not just Israel, it's also the West. And that's what I want to point out to people. This is why I continue to tell you, regardless if it's Trump or Kamala who wins, both of these parties want Israel to do what they're doing because they want Israel to protect the resources in the Middle East, because the U.S. sees that as a win for the U.S. as well. This is why they don't care about the Palestinian people. They want them gone. They just want the land and they want the resources. This was never really about Hamas. If this was really about Hamas, don't you think that the IDF would have gone into those tunnels that they said that Hamas is in? Don't you think they would have gone into those tunnels to actually try to capture Hamas? No, because it wasn't about Hamas. They saw this as an opportunity to kill as many Palestinians as possible, go in, take the land, get the resources, and be all set. And it would not just be a win for Israel, it would also be a win for the United States. You have to believe that these two political parties are totally fine with what Israel is and has been doing. That is why they continue to give them the weapons. If they really wanted a permanent ceasefire, which we do not have, they would not have continued to supply Israel with the weapons. I hope I make that very clear to everybody. It's not just a win for Israel. It is also a win for the United States government. That's how they see it. They want the resources. They want to protect it. So again, you'll see this as well. John Mersheimer was on Glenn Greenwald's show explaining that this was never about Hamas. Listen to this.
I come back to, because who doesn't know that unless you kill every last Palestinian, the ones that you leave are going to be ones that hate Israel and are going to want to get vengeance for what was just done to their society?
I think the answer to your question, Glenn, is that the Israelis were not mainly interested in destroying Hamas. They were interested in ethnically cleansing Gaza. They were interested in driving all of the Palestinians out of Gaza. And that, in effect, would solve the Hamas problem, and it would also solve the apartheid problem. I mean, as you and I know, Israel is an apartheid state. And that is a huge problem for the Israelis. They know what happened to South Africa. So they'd like to put an end to that status as an apartheid state. And ethnically cleansing does that. And it solves the Hamas problem. And that was the goal. it didn't work. And of course, it morphed into a genocide in the process.
So I
Yep.
guess then,
So does everybody hear that? That is very important for people to really understand. If you're trying to go after Hamas, you would have gone into the tunnels to go after Hamas. That was not the goal. The goal was to get rid of the people. Look at the land expansions in the West Bank that have been happening over the past couple of years. That didn't just start after October 7th. They have increased land expansions, kicking people out of their homes. They want all of the land and they want the resources. And what both of these two parties won't tell you, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, with the exception of a few individuals in those parties, for the most part, they also want Israel to have all the land. Now, they will use the excuse and say that it's biblical BS. It's about money. It's about resources. And by the way, we can debate the whole biblical thing because it's not biblical either. And I'm someone who grew up in the church. Let's continue.
that is the question, is you have Gaza, and as you said, there's basically nothing left to bomb. We've seen the drone footage now of places in northern Gaza, in southern Gaza, in Rafah, where Biden said it was a red line for him that the Israelis not attack. And then once they did, to save face, he said, oh, it's just a very limited pinpoint attack inside that refugee camp. And you look at it and the entire thing has been flattened and carpet bombed. And clearly Hamas is still there. They're still the governing body. And they have not succeeded in driving the Palestinians out of Gaza. So the question then becomes, what is going to happen to Gaza if those people remain, those 2+ million people, and presumably they will, at some point, it's going to have to be rebuilt. What do you think the Israelis expect in terms of post-war Gaza that it would be like, and what do you think it will be like?
Well, to put it in slightly different terms, the Israeli goal here was to make Gaza unlivable.
Yep.
And if you make Gaza unlivable, then presumably the Palestinians have no choice but to leave. They've failed in that regard. And what has to be done now is that Gaza has to be made livable. And of course, you see lots of trucks with food, water, oil, and medicine coming in now. And that will help in the short term make Gaza livable. The question is what happens over the long term? And a lot depends not only on what the Netanyahu government plans to do, but what the American government plans to do. And who knows? I mean, the fact is that Hamas is still in control. You remember the IDF, this is the IDF and the Biden administration were begging Netanyahu to tell them what his plan was for once the war started, or once the war stopped. In other words, the IDF and the Biden administration wanted to know how Gaza was going to be administered. He refused to give an answer. And the reason is he was planning to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. So he thought this would be a moot point. That didn't happen. But there's no plan in place. And at the same time, Hamas is in charge. And that means that if you rebuild Gaza, you'll be rebuilding it with Hamas in place. How that happens, very hard to see. So it's a giant question mark moving forward.
So that's a really good point there from John Mersheimer. But again, they wanted the land. That's what this is really all about. He goes on to say that they wanted to make Gaza unlivable. This is why they turned off the electricity. This is why they were trying to prevent the aid and the food from coming in. They wanted to leave them with nothing so that if they did not kill all of them with bombs, they would kill all of them by starvation or by disease. That was the plan. And then they could come in and get the land. Interesting, though, coming from a government where a lot of them are not even from there. As I've said before, a lot of them are not indigenous to the land. They're settlers. You want to see? Look at this video here, because this TikTok video really broke this down. Where are the Israeli government and soldiers from?
See where the Israeli government officials are actually from. Poland, Ireland, also Poland, Serbia, Ukraine, Morocco, Iraq, Morocco, Tunisia, Morocco, also Moroccan, and also Moroccan. And let's also look at their former prime minister's country of origin. American, Ukrainian, Russian, Lithuanian. And he's from Poland? Yeah, you get the point.
But what about the soldiers?
Before they get into the soldiers, I just want to remind you once again, they are settlers. And Benjamin Netanyahu is a perfect example. That's not even his name. He changed his name. So he changed his name to make it seem like he's indigenous from the land. He's not indigenous to the land. This has been going on. So you have people who are basically colonizers. They're settlers that moved to a land where Palestinians were already there. And there were Jewish people that were living there too as well. They were living fine together before Zionism, right? So they moved to this land and pushed the Palestinian people out. And they said, this is our home. We live here now. You can't be here. Settlers. That's what they are. Listen to what they show you about the soldiers.
From Switzerland. I'm from Sweden.
From Brooklyn, New York.
From Los Angeles, California.
From Miami, Florida.
From Palo Alto in the San Francisco Bay Area.
From San Francisco.
Arrived in Israel 4 months ago from Cape Town, South Africa.
From Atlanta, Georgia.
Florida, USA, Tampa Bay.
My name is Eitan. I'm a lone soldier from Atlanta, Georgia.
My name is Hanan Linder. I'm from West Hempstead, Long Island.
I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and something we take very seriously is hospitality.
I grew up in New Jersey my whole life.
I'm Yael, originally from South Africa.
My name's Jacob. I'm 24 years old, originally from Orange County, California.
My name's Ariel. I'm from Clifton, New Jersey.
My name is Gideon. I'm 23 years old. I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey.
What's up, guys? Isaac here. I'm 25 years old from Naples, Florida.
Hi, my name is Eden. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm serving in the 611 Battalion to make sure that it's all clear in our land.
This is my country. This is my home. And I'm doing something for it.
I'd like to join the IDF because growing up in a Zionist home with the Zionist.
So do you see this? So again, a lot of the soldiers are American. A lot of the soldiers are from the United States, not from Israel. This is what I've been trying to explain to people. So you have settlers and they're trying to pretend like they're not oppressed. They're not oppressed. You have settlers that have left places like Orange County in California, going over to Israel to put on an IDF uniform and kill Palestinians. That's actually what you have happening. And I've told you before, I don't believe if you're American and you're serving in another country's like army, I see that as a problem. I see that as a big problem. Obviously, if it were other countries, we would have a problem as well. Now, the problem that you run into, in particular with this two-party system, is that the Democratic Party isn't much better. Donald Trump wants to clear out the Palestinians. He is saying it overtly. He's saying the quiet part out loud. That's the thing about Donald Trump. He says things out in the open. But the reality is, Kamala and Biden wanted to do the same damn thing. They're not going to be like Trump and say it out in the open. They're going to do it more covertly. That's what they were going to do. And that's what Biden had been trying to do until, the protests and everything happened. So both of these parties support what Israel is doing. Trump is just saying it out loud and in the clear. So the problem that you run into, and you'll see this here with Pramila Jayapal on Majority Report, Emma Vigilant is going to ask Pramila, what is the Democratic Party doing about the criticism and the attack that they've been receiving about the genocide? Is there going to be any change? Listen to what Pramila Jayapal says. This is unbelievable.
And you mentioned there young people and voters of color. Now, when I first started getting excited about politics was the Obama campaign in 2008. And really, it was his stance on the Iraq War. I did not like that Hillary Clinton had voted for the Iraq War and that Obama was in opposition to it. And when I look at this election, I really wonder if that group of people, young people and voters of color who have experienced maybe American imperialism or like the boot of the state, seeing every day on their feeds, like a child whose brain is falling out of their skull as his father holds him up in Gaza. And Amnesty International now is calling it a genocide. Just that idea of like this, the economy's not working for me, and this is where our tax dollars are going. Yeah. I really, is the party reckoning with how this support for this slaughter has potentially damaged the party's brand long term for an entire generation of young people and also the voters you describe?
So I'm glad that Emma said slaughter. I'm glad that she described it that way. I'm glad that she described the vivid images that we've seen over the past year, because it needs to be said that way. It needs to be said that way. So I'm glad that she didn't try to sugarcoat that to Pramila Jayapal, because it needs to be said to their face. But listen to what she says.
My honest answer to you is I don't think that conversation is happening. I really don't. I think it's been frustrating to me as somebody who shares, and has been really vocal on Gaza, and been targeted for it by some of the big moneyed interests on this issue, many of whom are Republican mega donors, by the way. I think that this, I agree with you that this was not, by the way, this was not just young people. It was.
Let me pause for a second. She says Republican mega donors. It's not just Republican mega donors. Don't forget, you guys, again, Kamala Harris was in with AIPAC. Kamala Harris was also getting donations from the Israeli lobby. So this is not just, see, I told you what they've been trying to do. They just want to call it out on the Republican side when they got members of their own party doing the same thing. So let's not forget, it wasn't a Republican who attacked and came after Pramila Jayapal on CNN. It was Dana Bash. It was Dana Bash that confronted her and said, oh, yeah, that's sad. That's horrible. But do you condemn Hamas? Dana Bash was the one who went after Pramila Jayapal. Dana Bash isn't a Republican. So don't forget that, guys. Don't forget that. Pramila's job is to try to convince you, well, we know we got our issues, but the Republicans are still worse. Same thing if you were to interview someone in the Republican Party. We know we got our issues, but the Democrats are way worse. Their job is to just keep you in the duopoly at the end of the day. Let me let her finish here.
It's not just folks who are Arab or Muslim or Middle Eastern even. It was Black folks. I mean, I think that we saw a lot of, I was in a lot of communities with Black people talking to leaders of the Black community who were really pushing on this as well. And I do think that there was a real disillusionment with our foreign policy and, specifically on the war in the Middle East. I mean, I think that maybe there was some drop off early on with some other things, but I think that this issue alone, certainly if you look at key states like Michigan and even Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, there were significant drop-offs and I know because I went door to door on this issue specifically, trying to see if there was a way to bring voters in while recognizing the despair that I felt as well. And so I don't feel like this is one area where I do not yet feel like we are having a real conversation about the consequences, the moral consequences, the consequences to U.S. leadership in the world, much less the political ramifications of what the United States has done or not done.
And to make matters worse, the reality is there's a good chance that I would say probably about half of the Arab American voters that typically would vote for the Democratic Party, there's a good chance that the ones that decided not to support the Democrats this presidential election will not come back to the Democratic Party. So how do you win Michigan? How do you win Michigan without Dearborn, without Detroit? I am very, very, I can't even say disappointed anymore. I'm very livid that the Democratic Party decided not to move correctly on this issue, because that could have changed things. But they would rather lose and just fundraise than to do the right thing. But make no mistake, Donald Trump displacing the Palestinian people is horrendous. And nobody should support that. And if you supported Donald Trump, I think this is something that needs to come from Trump's base. I think that Trump's base, MAGA, I think you would have to be the one to hold Donald Trump accountable. The rest of us have been protesting for over a year. But I think those of you that supported him because of maybe some of the other issues, but you didn't like the position with Gaza, I think it's going to take you guys. I really do feel like Trump is going to have to receive tremendous backlash from his base. Now, will that happen? Probably not. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.